So, Santa brought the Baptists across the street recorded bells for Christmas this year. That is my theory, since it is only in the last few months that 3 times a day, 9, noon, and 3, the bells activate and play old-timey Protestant hymns. Those are the songs I grew up with, and they are etched in my brain and in my bones. So thrice a day, I have the opportunity to revisit some of my spiritual trauma, as the recording reminds me at noon, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine, oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. As you might imagine, especially since I made reference to spiritual trauma, engaging with this music, something that is completely reflexive for me, can be a bit activating for me. Miss Katie has seen me. Tuesdays, we finish our meeting a little afternoon, and the bells ring, I start singing. It just happens. So today, I would like us to consider what it means to put faith in the rear view. So at my house, we watch a fair amount of YouTube videos, which is where I became familiar with the concepts of deconstruction and deconversion. I'd been doing the work for decades without ever knowing that there were formalized pathways for the work and moving beyond former religious patterning. This is a good time for me to emphasize that it is not necessary to leave behind our religious paths and practices in order to be Unitarian Universalists. As long as those paths and practices are in alignment with our values and keep love at the center, you can blend and hyphenate as needed. I'm fairly confident that for most of you, the idea of faith in the rear view is not a neutral one. I can say that because statistically, 85% or more of all Unitarian Universalists are come-inners, meaning we came in from some other faith tradition or from none. Only 10 to 15% of adult UUs were raised in the faith. So that little bit of math trivia is maybe for a sermon for another day. I bring it up because it is not my intention to downgrade or belittle anyone's religious paths or practices. Today I will be speaking from my own experience, using the definitions that I have learned from others who have also engaged in the process of deconstruction. I will also note that if not you, probably someone you know is engaged in that process. I need to change garb. I'm putting on my Wonder Woman stole for a little extra strength. There we go. Oh, how cute. Yeah, that was me. For nearly 18 years, I knew only love and acceptance from the brand of Christianity that my family embraced. My grandfather, pictured, had been raised a Nazarene, but switched to the Wesleyan Church when he met my mother. It wasn't much of a switch, since both churches are part of what is known as the holiness tradition. The holiness traditions put an emphasis on moral purity. So put the word no in front of things that are fun. I'm so bad. But no drinking, no dancing, no card playing, no wearing makeup, no, just no. But, it didn't feel like a lot of no, because there was so much love and so much yes. And it was there. I was the darling of an older congregation. I memorized Bible verses, sang about fountains filled with blood, And I grew up to be that weird kid at school that carried her denim Bible and read it during study hall. I probably should have been studying geometry because no amount of prayer was going to make me pass that Regents exam. Another sad story for another day. When my parents and I joined a Baptist church, I became part of a quartet that sang at church and nursing homes. We are pictured here. On the left is us as, I don't know, we must have been 14 maybe. Note to anybody that sings, don't let someone take your picture while you're singing because you look goofy. And then the other picture is of us just a couple years ago. We don't get together very often, we're scattered, but it was nice to get together. And when we get together, we still sing because we don't need the music, because the music is etched in our brains and in our bones. 2 months before my 18th birthday, my parents dropped me off at Bob Jones University. And that is where everything went boom. Bob Jones was not a Christian college. It was and is a Christian cult. The level of control over students' bodies and thoughts was and continues to be complete. It is absolutely not surprising to me that the university is thoroughly entwined with the Project 2025 document and agenda for Christian nationalism. I left Bob Jones at the end of the first semester, and I was broken. Everything about my identity had been wrapped up in my faith, and now that was shattered beyond repair. For the next 40 plus years, I had recurring nightmares that I was forced to return to campus. When I embraced paganism and later Unitarian Universalism, my friends from high school judged me harshly and asked me how I, the spiritual giant of the group, could have fallen so far from grace. So I think that's enough background to give you a picture of the why of my deconstruction work. Before we get into the process of faith deconstruction, I want to assure you that, like the Japanese ceramic process of repairing and restoring known as kintsugi, my journey has brought me to a place of spiritual peace and healing. And even 4 years ago, the nightmares ceased. I'll say more about that at the end. Before deconstruction can even begin, there needs to be a deconversion. That was a word I had never, ever encountered. I guess that makes sense considering the circles that I was in. No one deconverted, let me tell you. But it's exactly what it sounds like. You unconvert. Conversion, at least in that particular religious setting, was an instantaneous thing. You said the words, and you had been converted. Deconversion is a moment when one says of their own free will, I'm out of here. That is a threshold moment, and it is an important one. But it is only the beginning of the work of deconstructing what may be a lifetime built up expectations, activities, and ways of being that are no longer serving the person we are becoming. In some cases, deconversion is seeing, perhaps for the very first time, that we are living someone else's story. So then there is deconstruction. According to Carrie Nieuwhof, an author and speaker on church leadership, I quote, "Faith deconstruction is the process of critically re-examining, questioning, or dismantling religious beliefs, often starting with a rejection of dogma, authoritarianism, or perceived toxic theology. driven by crises of faith, institutional scandals, or personal trauma, this journey can lead to rebuilding a personalized spirituality or deconversion into atheism. End of quote. I will note that in the United States, the vast majority of those experiencing deconversion and deconstruction are those who are leaving toxic forms of Christianity. If we lived someplace else where the dominant cultural influence was not Christianity, we would likely be focusing on a different religious tradition, right? So I guess what I want to say is I haven't singled out Christianity. It's the air we breathe in the United States, and more so now than, I was going to say ever, but I haven't lived entirely that long, so for a really long time. Alrighty, there are three components of deconstruction. They are reassessing authority, which means shifting authority from established scriptures or leaders toward self-examination and personal experience. If we were talking about this in psychological terms, we would be using words like self-actualization and individuation, shifting away from an authority to trusting your own voice. De-identification is reducing, altering, or removing a religious identity. That's where, when people ask you what your religion is, which is not so much a thing here anymore. It was a thing like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. You moved to a new town, people asked you what church you were going to go to. Les and I have lived in the South, and so it's still one of the first questions that people ask. And so it's not reflexively saying, oh, I'm a whichever group you were part of. It's de-identification. So you might be saying something like, I am a human being in search of peanut butter. I don't know. You'll find something that will leave people mystified. That's the whole goal. I'm being bad again. The third part of deconstruction is targeting toxic beliefs. These toxic beliefs are usually about sexuality, gender identity, or hell, right? So you can let those kind of go. So that is the components of deconstruction. Now, some of the common reasons for deconstruction. So maybe religious trauma. That is a big phrase, and you might think, what I had was not trauma. Well, just leave room for that, right? If you're like me, you may have pushed that down and made it light for a really long time. But it's kind of, I don't know, like just putting Drano down your drains and expecting that all your pipes are suddenly going to be magically clean. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. So religious trauma, our experiences of shame, abuse, or legalism. That's what I experienced at Bob Jones. Ideological conflicts. Those are disparities between evangelical subculture and the life and teachings of Jesus. And I don't know about you, but I see that on the internet all the time. People wearing I love Jesus and they're carrying a gun. Like, can you not feel that disconnect? So let's turn to outcomes and stages. The first of which is reconstruction. Some individuals retain faith, but rebuild a new, often more nuanced theological framework. So you may end up not leaving a tradition, but taking it in on your terms, more nuanced. Just because someone said so is not the reason for you to believe a thing. Deconversion. That is the complete abandonment of religious beliefs and disaffiliation from religious communities. That doesn't mean you can't ever go to another community. The way it's worded it might indicate that, but it's just letting go of what has been harmful. And the third outcome is perpetual questioning. That's where we come in. That's what we're really good at here. Unitarian Universalists are really good at questions. We value them. So many adopt a path of ongoing inquiry rather than settling on a new set of rigid beliefs. So let's talk about Unitarian Universalism. As I noted, this faith family is predominantly made of come-inners, those not raised in the tradition, but finding here a home for questioning and for exploration. Some arrive at these doors seeking a spiritual home, while others may be looking for community or a place to live out an ideology of social or ecological justice. Our doors, hearts, and minds are open. And for some, Unitarian Universalism is more of a way station, a place of respite and regrouping, maybe an oasis of loving acceptance in a world that is increasingly intolerant and unkind. We can be that great place to do the work of deconstruction and a place to find the tools to rebuild and to heal. Whether this faith is your forever home or a resting place for your soul's journey, the important thing is that you have found your way here. Your faith formation will include shared values and a commitment to keep love, not fear, not judgment, but love at the center of the person you are becoming. Over the years, I've learned, however imperfectly, to weave together the bright and the dark of my experience. Answering the call to ministry has offered the opportunity to journey with others and to be present to the mystery that opens our hearts and minds to the beauty of this life we have been given, no matter its hardships. And unlike my former experience, where beliefs were tied down with the weight of dogma and expectations, this transcendent faith continues to urge me to explore new and wider vistas. That phrase comes from the great UU religious educator, Sophia Lyon-Faz, who articulated what has made this faith tradition so vital and so contrary to the more restrictive traditions all around us. So I invite you to join me in a shared reading. I will read as one, and y'all read as all. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. Wherever you are on the journey, I hope you have heard the message that it is not only perfectly normal to reevaluate your religious leanings. It is absolutely imperative that we do so. Everything about us changes over time. Why shouldn't our religious leanings also change? Most recently, I have been exploring what Jungian psychoanalyst Jerry Wright has coined as psychological mysticism. I'm going to read you just 2 short paragraphs. Psychological mysticism is for those who value the human mind and the discoveries of modern science, including depth psychology, as avenues of continuing revelation. The paradigm is meant for those who have a felt sense that the divine encounter happens within and spreads outward, rather than coming from a remote, external metaphysical deity. It will likely speak to those who hunger and thirst for the experience of the numinous, which has unlimited manifestations and innumerable names, and to which all can bow and none can control or possess. Psychological mysticism cuts through centuries of dogmatic theology and speculation about external supernatural deities and devils. The mystical perspective is one of radical immanence. End of quote. At the beginning of this exploration, I mentioned that after decades of nightmares in which I was forced to return to Bob Jones, those nightmares ceased 4 years ago. That was when I had begun studying my dreams through Jungian psychological lenses. I still occasionally dream of being on that campus, but instead of being locked behind those gates as a prisoner or victim, I return through those gates to lead people out. And I may never reach a point where I don't reflexively sing along to the blood hymns piped from the church across the street. But I can change how I receive them. Blessed Assurance was my grandmother's favorite song. And although the source of my own assurance is different from hers, I can appreciate the love hers inspired, and I can strive to live accordingly.